This is the first books discussion we've had of this nature. So before we kick things off, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nembhard, who's a professor of community justice and social economic development in the Department of Africana Studies at John Jay College in New York City. She's also the director of the McNair Post-Baccalaureate Achievement Program. She's done a lot of work in specializing in economics, Black political economy, and popular economics literacy. Today, we're joined to jump into her book, Collective Courage, that I know a lot of us feel is more than timely given all of the things we face and will continue to face as the world continues to shift and turn and change paradigms. So without that, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nembhard, for joining us. And there's one piece that I cannot leave out. We did this intro before, and she made sure that I mentioned, which was most important, is that she's a mother of 2 and a grandmother of 3. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for remembering that part. All of you who do any kind of parenting know that it's probably the hardest job we do, and it's one of the things I'm most proud about. But I also feel like it makes me more of a human being to remember that part and not just to talk about all the credentials and that kind of thing. So,
amen.
Thank you so much. I do have a special guest who I'm going to introduce in a second, but I also want to start out by recognizing the original stewards of the land, wherever we are, whatever space we're in, to remember that. I also want to bring our ancestors into this space and take the strength and wisdom that they've passed on to us and bring it into the room and use that as we talk about these topics and as we think about these issues and what we're going to do next. And remember that, you know, knowledge is used for action, right? Knowledge is supposed to be applied so that we can make the world better. It's not just knowledge for knowledge's sake. So welcome everybody, welcome to this space. I don't know if, here's the book that we'll be discussing. I thought, and I guess we all thought we would be discussing it chapter by chapter so that we have enough time to really delve into all the nuances and pieces. It's great because that means I get to read it over. I realized a couple times, once I was being interviewed and they asked me about something and I had forgotten the details. I think it was one of the Richmond examples. I had totally forgotten the details and I was like, oh my gosh, and I was on a live radio show. So of course I fudged my way through and I did what all the politicians did. I said, oh yeah, that's a great example and I'm glad you brought it up, but this example, and I went into one that I could remember, but I was so embarrassed, I went and checked it out and actually they were right. It's a fascinating example. I've been using it ever since, but I realized then that I really need to reread the book. So now this is giving me a chance to reread chapter by chapter. And I do want everyone to introduce themselves first, but first my special guest, Dr. Curtis Haynes, Professor of Economics and Finance at Buffalo State College. He and I got our PhDs in economics together. He's the one, if you read the book, that I actually dedicated the book to, because he's the one when I started trying to understand and think about what collective community-based economic development looked like. He reminded me that he had actually studied Du Bois's theory of group economics in grad school and had written some stuff on it. He told me what to start reading. And, you know, 15 years later, I was able to publish a book on it. We published some articles together. So I have him here. One, I just want you all to get to know him, but also he's going to do the section tonight on Introduction to Cooperative Economics. But let me have him introduce himself a little bit more right now, and then I'll have everybody else introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, folks. It's a pleasure to participate in this this first book club. And Dr. Gordon-Nembhard, thank you so much for inviting me to share time with you and these wonderful people. The young man just spoke just recently saying that the title of your book, Collective Courage, is apropos for right now. But it's also been apropos for the history of our struggle from being free people on the African continent, being brought to the Americas in chains, the struggles through slavery, the struggles through sharecropping, that kind of serfdom, the struggles through separate and unequal in our modern economy, right? And so this idea of collective courage is a very long idea. But some people would say, right, that you'll never hear the lion's story unless the lion learns how to talk, right? And so this idea of collective courage, I mean, we know the story, but Dr. Gordon Nembhard really played a key role in bringing a lot of this material together in a concise way. My name is Curtis Haynes. I'm a professor at Buffalo State College. And my training is in political economy. Jessica and I, we went to school at the University of Massachusetts. At the time, the school was known as the Harvard for Marxists, right? It was a radical, right, Jessica? It was like the Harvard for Marxists, right? And so we were introduced to a very progressive curriculum, progressive ideas, right? But it was very, very weak in the understanding of the socioeconomic conditions of Africans, the African diaspora, or African Americans here on the continent of the United States of America. And so her and I were very fortunate. We became part of an organization called the Third World Caucus. We were a graduate student organization, and we did kind of like this. I mean, we generated collective courage. If it wasn't for that caucus, I never would have been able to finish my degree, and I'm quite sure Jessica would say something very similar to that. But what we were very aware of was the very Eurocentric and ethnocentric curriculum that was taught in economics. And this curriculum, it's one thing to, you and I, we know that this idea of a Eurocentric curriculum, we're familiar with it. We understand that we're on this other side. But one of the dilemmas that we face when you have a Eurocentric, ethnocentric curriculum, especially when it's presented as truth, as absolute truth, right? Where there's no other alternatives, we see the holes, we see the gaps in that particular thing. And so when we went to graduate school, that's what we saw, right? We did get a very strong consciousness of a Marxian understanding of class analysis, but race and those issues of race did not really show up. I was fortunate enough to be able to work with my mentor, Lloyd Hogan, right? Lloyd Hogan wrote a book called The Principles of Black Political Economy, right? And as you know, Jessica is pretty much moved in the direction of quantifying the history that already existed for collective courage, right? In my particular work, I moved deeper into the realm of economic theory, recognizing that my job, what I came to understand that my struggle, my contribution to the struggle is to challenge the paradigms, right? The dominant paradigm. So as I introduce Dr. Gordon Nembhard and what she's doing in the idea of cooperative economics, the way I understand challenging the paradigms is that I'm very clear that the mainstream paradigms in economics, we call them, if you're not familiar with economics, right? But the mainstream paradigms are neoclassical economics, Keynesian economics, and Marxian economics. Those are the mainstream paradigms. And those paradigms, the thing about the economics, right, is that economists are treated as priests, right? Whatever the economist says, it's gotta be truth, right? Because the economist said it, right? But we understand, yeah, right? We understand that it's a relative truth. And it's got a huge amount of biases because it does not capture the full development of the human population on the planet, right? So the significance of cooperative economics, the way I understand it, is that we are challenging the dominant paradigm in economics, in economic theory, economic policy, and economic practice. So economic theory, the significance of this is that economic theory, for example, neoclassical economic theory justifies the practices of laissez-faire economics, hands-off economics, and profit maximization, cost minimization, and generally, profit maximization at any cost. And the neoclassical priests justified that kind of economics, no government intervention, and no issues of race, no issues of class, no issues of gender. Keynesian economics, on the other hand, is an alternative economic theory that justifies that, and the policy associated with the economic theory is government intervention, right? So a lot of the government intervention that came through the New Deal, the Johnson poverty programs and what have you, right? Those were examples of government intervention, but by and large, the idea of that kind of government intervention was, kind of like taken from the rich, given the poor, distribution of income. But again, it did not understand the issues of race and class, specifically, for example, in the United States of America, the ghettoization of the African American, a lot of the inner cities in the United States of America. Marxian economic theory, right? Again, a theory justified class analysis and class struggle, okay? So, but Jessica and I, we are in pushing and seeing the world from the perspective of Black political economy. And Black political economy recognizes, through the work of Lloyd Hogan, he recognized that the African-American condition, that what we see, right, when we look at the condition of the African-American in our urban communities, specialized the urban communities, is a reflection of the wealth that we created for other people over centuries, right? So
Curtis, sorry, we have a hand raised. Do you want to answer it now, or you want to keep going and then answer it afterwards?
Now, let me just complete this thought with regard to the significance of cooperative economics, right?
Okay.
So we are operating in a paradigm that sees and understands the Black condition, that understands the historical nature of being communal population on the African continent, the significance of slavery, the significance of the feudalism of sharecropping, the significance of separate and unequal, and the policy work that we feel that's appropriate with that kind of understanding is cooperative economics. So Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard, one of the things in the 90s, we spent a lot of time traveling around, talking about this alternative paradigm. And one of the questions was, where are the examples? And so Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard said, we have examples, and she wrote this book, Collective Courage, to explain those examples, to show those examples. But what's critical here is to understand that cooperative economics is not just by itself, it's policy, right? Connected to an economic paradigm, a way of understanding economics that understands the Black condition, not as exception to the rule, but that no, Americans are no different than any other human beings on the planet, okay? So that is the significance of it. Black political economy, cooperative economic theory, and community building practices. Dr. Gordon Nembhard.
Great, thank you so much. So we have a question, and then I did want everyone to introduce themselves. I think, yeah, we just have about 24 people, so we should be able to do that. Kenneth Hawkins, question.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, thanks for taking, and always, if you see my hand raised, I ask a lot of questions anyway, so.
Okay.
You can elect to make me wait until the end or just never call on me. I'm good with that, just to let you know. But, I have a book around here, I think it's When Affirmative Action Was White, and that author her motives have since been questioned, by the way, but I like the book nonetheless. But you said something earlier, Dr. Haynes, and I didn't find this in the book. I think it said after World War II that when the troops were coming back, they were able to get involved in some affirmative action policies by getting homes on the cheap, right? They were building villages and homes for very inexpensive prices, and they were intended to house these veterans. But there were Black veterans too, who couldn't cash in on that housing. And what I wanted to know is, like, how couldn't they have cashed in? Like, what prevented them from getting that housing as well?
So you're talking about the GI Bill.
Yeah.
And right, it was supposed to help veterans to get homes and to go to college. And what happened is, because that policy was built on a racialized capitalist system, you still had underlying barriers, right? So while white veterans could easily get mortgages, right, and could get access to homes in certain neighborhoods, Black veterans had trouble getting mortgages. They were redlined, so if they wanted to buy in a certain place, they couldn't. The banks wouldn't even let them buy in certain neighborhoods. They wouldn't give them mortgages. They wouldn't accept their credit as good credit. If they did give them mortgages, it was, again, those high subprime rates, so untenable rates. The same thing with colleges. You might have a little money from the GI Bill to go to college, but the white colleges wouldn't allow Blacks in to them. So that's
Okay,
where the
thank
barriers.
you. Yeah, you're absolutely. Thank you for that. I forgot. Thank you.
Now, Kenneth, are you related to Pollard Fair?
I think I am.
It shows, I tell you. Now, so this is Imhotep. I like our speakers, facilitators, scholars. Don't let this audience dominate and take the ball from you. They ball hogs, so be careful. It's a great question, but if we could just roll out the intro.
I won't ask anything else. I promise.
No,
that was it. That was it.
It was a great question, but just let's give folks an opportunity to introduce themselves. All right, man.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. We do want dialogue, but I understand. So the next thing, so Curtis was giving you some context, right? And as you'll see, the introduction to the book does have that whole section, not as much about Black political economy, but definitely the issues about what's cooperative economics, how is it different from capitalism and neoclassical economics, that kind of thing. So that he was giving you that context. I did want us to introduce everyone to introduce themselves before we go on, and then a lot of this first meeting is actually for us to give you context. So I'll also give you more context about how and why I wrote the book. And then a lot of it is going to be question and answer. And I also want to set out a structure where each week we do have some of you either starting out or ending with your own reflections on the chapter that we're covering, that kind of thing. So I don't want this to just be a lecture, even if Mr. Imhotep is hoping for a lecture.
No, I'm not hoping for a lecture. I know this dude well. He's family.
Okay.
He warns you on the front end. If you're not careful, he's going to do a Michael Jordan.
I'm not going to call on him again.
No, please do. You just might have to take the ball back from him. That's all I'm trying to say.
Right. So dare I have him introduce himself first so we can move on?
Yes, let's do that.
Oh, you want me to introduce myself?
Yes, quickly, 30 seconds.
Kenneth Hawkins. I teach composition and African American studies at the community college here in Tampa, Florida. No, that's it. I'm related to the Fairs.
Okay, Paulette, you could introduce yourself too then.
Okay, Paulette Fair here at Kepra in Indianapolis. And from the very first time I heard Dr. Nembhard speak at a cooperative conference, you know how you all of a sudden know that there's a connection that you always have. And so when we had opportunities to have other interactions, thank you so much, Dr. Nembhard, for being here with us today. I'll just pass it on to the next person next to me on the screen, which is Michaela Ivy.
Um, Hi, everybody. My name is Michaela. I'm a senior at Butler University. I study anthropology, and I'm pretty new to the Kepler community. So thanks for having me.
Great.
What's up, Michaela?
Welcome.
Hi,
Okay, I'm just going to go down the participants list. That might be the fastest thing. Alvin, quick introduction.
Alvin, Pepper Institute, good to be with y'all. And also thanks to the Indianapolis Recorder. They let us live stream this to their page too.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah, I appreciate that. Incotep, do you want to say anything? Does everyone?
Yeah, skinny. I ditto Paulette. I'm excited. More than what I thought I was going to get. The Eurocentric, the Afrocentric, Black political comment. Woo woo. Let's do it.
Great. Gila.
Gila.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're okay. So my name is Agila Nataraj. I also work at the Kepler Institute, with the grants management and climate environmental justice work. Just really grateful for y'all to be here, and also appreciate having Dr. Haynes on. And I will pass it to Albany.
Hey everyone, I'm Albany Hart. I am CEO and founder of my own consulting firm, Heart to Heart Consulting. I am a financial and data analyst for That Piece Open Mic. Just recently graduated from Butler University. And I am really, really, really grateful and excited to be here. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to pass it off to Drew.
Hello, everybody. I am Jayru. Can you guys hear me? I hope so. But my name is Jayru. I am a senior at IUPUI in Indianapolis. I'm studying civic leadership, and I also intern for Kepra. And just really excited to be here, real ready to learn. I'll say you can go off the attendance list. I don't have anybody new on my screen.
Okay. Pambana.
Pambana Wishi Kepler Institute. Good to be here. Looking forward to learning and soaking it all up. And I will pass it to, where am I on it? Will, I guess.
My name is Will Grant. I live in California. I work with the Pachamama Alliance, and new to the Kepler world. Just really excited to be in the community and the conversations that are happening. I'll pass it to, it looks like Jane 6.
Hi, my name's Jane Rappenchuck, and I've been doing, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I got my headphones in and it's a weird mic. I've been doing book group with Kepra for a while now, and coming down different times. I'm really excited to hear about this because it's kind of like we swim in these economic dominant theories, and I'm really interested in learning about alternate ways of looking at economics. So it's very exciting. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks. Alex? No, Alex?
Yeah, still here, checking in.
Okay.
Hi, this is Alex James. I'm also part of the extended fair entourage, I suppose. You hear my mother-in-law, Paulette, laughing in the background. I have come to develop tremendous respect for the dynamism and effectiveness of KI and the work that they are doing and will continue to do. My personal background, actually grew up as a bit of a faculty brat in Chapel Hill, and ended up getting excited about international development after living in northeastern Brazil for a period of time before going to college. Done undergraduate work in economics and history, and also graduate work in history with a focus on comparative development, models of development and immigration between the northern and southern hemispheres with regard to the African presence. Got very excited about the idea of how to make tangible impacts, and ended up going into consulting. I've worked now for close to 20 years as a consultant and entrepreneur, mainly in the energy and telecom space in Africa, Latin America, and in the US. And most recently have come to appreciate that a lot of the traditional models for looking at development and empowerment are sadly lacking. And that's why I was particularly excited to hear about this approach and looking at ways to develop new models for truly sustainable and regenerative in terms of community health models. So wonderful to be here and looking forward to it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Anita. Anita?
I'm here. My name is Anita Williams. I'm in Indianapolis. I'm part of the Indy Black Chamber of Commerce, and I'm glad to receive the information and be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ari?
Yes, hello, I'm Ari Gatewood. I am co-founder and creative director for Artistry Studios. I'm a lifelong member or student of Kepler Institute.
Hey, Ari.
Hey, Ari, what's up?
Hey, y'all.
Great, thank you. Cassandra.
Okay. Hi, my name is Cassandra Gray. I'm a philanthropy major and minoring in media arts, and I'm just happy to be here, happy to learn.
Thank you. Deandra?
Hi there, I'm Deandra Thompson, and I am the CEO of A Learning Bee Academy. It's a STEM-based preschool, and I'm also here just happy to learn and learn about the book and more about the book club and more about the Kepler Institute.
Great. Oh, we didn't really introduce Kepler, did we? Maybe we'll do that afterwards. I have iPad 24.
iPad 24 is Ronaldo Menace. I am here in Indianapolis. I am very familiar with the Kepler Institute as I sit on the Forward City Council Committee. Currently have a couple of clients that's exploring ecosystems and trying to come up with different ways to enhance and empower a small minority community. So I'm glad to be here and glad to be learning and participate in the book club. Thank you.
Great. I have two iPhones. One iPhone has their camera on and one iPhone doesn't have their camera on. That's the only way I can tell the difference. So camera on iPhone. Who are you?
I'm Tressa Majandu, and I have hi. I've been doing things with Kepru for a few years now, several years, and I teach at Ivy Tech Community College in the culinary school, but I teach the customer service classes, and I'm a part of the Diversity, Belonging, and Inclusive board at the university as well.
Oh, great. Thanks. And now the other iPhone.
Hi, I'm Deidre Fairjames.
Oops, oh, maybe there's three iPhones. Oh, Ron Shard, I'll call you next, but you have a name in front of your iPhone.
Yes, Rashida Hansard, and I'm on the iPhone without video. I'm kind of multitasking. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and actually was doing some research. I'm a history aficionado, and did some research and actually stumbled upon this and the Institute's website, and had the opportunity to listen to your YouTube, Dr. Jessica, and I was super fascinated, and so that's why I'm here. So really excited to be a part of this. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And now, I'm sorry, the third iPhone. Sorry, I cut
Hi.
you off. I was trying to.
No problem. No problem. Hi, this is Deidre Fairjames. Paula, it's my mother, and Alex, my husband. Kenneth is my cousin, but more like a brother. I'm also a board member of KI, and again, also working out of international economic development. So always looking for to learn and expand ways of development that aren't exploitative. So glad to be here. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Kalia? Ligon?
Hi,
Kalia Ligon. Used to be really easy before I got married. It was Kalia Wade. My luck. So my work is with an organization called Forward Cities. We focus on inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem building here in Indianapolis. And I'm also a realtor.
A great realtor. Have her be your realtor.
Oh, cool.
Thank you, Alvin.
There's a second Capru on here. No? Okay. Mariah, how about Mariah?
Mimi.
Oh.
It says Kepra. Sorry, I'll change it. But hey, everyone.
Oh, okay.
Mimi Zaka. I'm super excited to be here. So my first Kepra event 5 years ago was actually watching Jessica Gordon Nembhard's interview with Laura Flanders. We were having a youth-led forum about closing of grocery stores and what we wanted to see happen in the community. And that is what sucked me into the Kepra Institute and changed my life and inspired us to pursue cooperative models, which was how we founded the Community Controlled Food Initiative in 2015. And now we do all kinds of stuff working with farmers, moving produce to people in a co-op. So, I mean, Jessica is just like one of my personal heroes, and I'm so happy that we're working with you. I'm just thrilled and excited. So thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your knowledge with us so that we continue to turn it into action for community.
Great, thanks very much. Mariah, now.
Hello, my name is Mariah Ivy. I'm a part of Kepra Institute, and this session is very timely as well, as we've been doing an 8-week session focusing on community wealth building, which I had the pleasure of contributing to that curriculum, so I'm always here to learn more. Africana Studies major at IUPUI, philosophy minor, spoken word artist and musician.
Wow, great. Maurice.
Hi, my name is Maurice Broadus. I'm a science fiction and fantasy author. I'm the resident Afrofuturist here at the Kepler Institute, and I'm thinking through future models for my next novel, so this is very timely and helpful.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm actually in the middle of creating a graphic novel version of Collective Courage, so maybe I should talk with you about that, but we're about halfway through, so I'll tell more about that later. We got Mimi already. Almost done, I think. Who we got? Will went already too, right? Will Grant?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So I think we're done, right? Did I miss anybody?
Damon, did you go?
Damon, did you go?
No, I'm sorry. I had to jump off and jump back on.
Oh, okay.
How you doing? Damon Tazia. Just a long-time student. Recently was asked to be on the board, and super excited.
Great.
Is Brer Rabbit here?
Yes, I'm here. It's Diapadisa. Last but not least, glad to be here.
Great. We're always glad to have you. I'm always happy to share space with you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So now we sort of know each other. We've heard about everybody. It seems like a great group. I'm really excited for all you guys can bring. As I said, I'm hoping that we'll figure out a way for everybody to take a chapter either at the beginning of each session or toward the end to give you reflections on the chapter. So I don't know how we should do it. Maybe I should have people sign up or something. But I'll think about it as we go along and then figure out how to get people to commit to commenting on a chapter. So we can do that later. Just again, let me just quickly go over sort of the how I see the whole 11 sessions going and how I organize the book. And then I think Dr. Haynes is going to do a little bit more on what is community economics and cooperative economics, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion about your first impressions, what you're hoping to learn, and the the 10 more sessions that we have, that kind of thing. So the book, as we said, it was a way to try to look at if cooperative economics is a policy strategy, then what do we know about the role that African Americans have played in the cooperative economics movement? What kind of examples of African American co-ops do we have? That kind of thing. And so I did start with W.E.B. Du Bois and his understanding of what he called group economics and collective economics. He was more concerned about economic cooperation broadly, so things like the Underground Railroad and mutual aid societies, not just officially incorporated cooperatives. And so I also got that notion from him. So a lot of the first chapters are more about the unofficial mutual aid collective activity that was done. Some of that we now call solidarity economics. I didn't use that language as much in the book. Since writing the book, I've become much more connected with our notions of solidarity economics. So I talk about solidarity cooperatives and solidarity cooperative economics to bring in more of that notion of some of the informal kinds of things we do as human beings, and especially as human beings with racial and gender solidarity, and how that translates into economic activity and economic alternatives. So you'll see examples of that. I actually had a little battle with my book editors because they got confused because I started out with a chronology in a very sort of linear way. What were some of the first collective economic efforts after we were forcibly brought to US soil, and then making my way up. And then, by the time I got to the 20th century, I switched it up and started focusing on themes, education and self-study, role of women, role of youth, importance of agriculture and farming, and then importance of this notion of a solidarity collective sense. And so it took me a while to get my editor to allow me to do the book that way, because normally people either do one or the other, right? You either have chapters based on themes or you have chapters based on chronology. And I insisted that I needed to do both, that I needed to start with some kind of chronology, but then I needed to switch over to themes. Hopefully, if you've read the book, you see that I did win finally, but it took me a while to convince somebody that you could write a book that way and that it could still make sense. And you guys can give me feedback. I mean, obviously it's too late, I'm not changing it, but you can let me know if it does make sense. But as I said, the way that I sort of was looking at it was first trying to set up, right? So the intro is more a little bit about the theory and how the theory works and organization of the book. But then after that, I was trying to look at, so what's the early kinds of cooperative economics, collective economic activity that we did? What did it look like? Who was involved? Then move into what are the more formal, how did these activities become more formalized, and in what kinds of ways were they more formal? And then get into some very specific examples of incorporated co-ops. And then, as I said, move into why education and training was so important, and how in African American co-ops it turned out to be such an essential feature. What examples do we have of co-ops that started that way? The role of women and how women were so important. The role of economic cooperation in the whole civil rights movement and things like that. And for me, it made sense because I think sort of Curtis set this up already, but because that notion that it's not just about what people are doing in practice, but how it addresses problems and solves problems, and how people found humane, racially conscious ways to solve existing problems and to move ahead as human beings to make things better. And so that, I think that was sort of that was why that kind of a progression made sense to me, because it helped to answer all those little pieces and to show different stages of those things. So we'll see as we go through whether we like that or not. I have also helped people to think about, the themes from the beginning, even though I don't get to the themes till like the middle of the book. But definitely, again, those themes about human agency, role of women, role of young people, Blacks taking charge of their own economics, using co-ops as survival. Then there's also examples of using co-ops for resistance, and then examples of using co-ops for economic independence toward liberation. So there's a variety of different themes. You can still read the whole book looking at those themes. And then, as I said, you can also look at just the progression from sort of more informal activities to more formal activities, and then into the 20th century. I guess I have a couple of examples of the 21st century. So that's sort of the overview. I think Curtis also hit most of why I wrote the book, but the biggest thing was, as I started realizing that cooperatives could and are a very viable community development strategy, when I started to talking to people about it, I got such blank stares, actually worse than blank stares. I got people telling me Black people don't do co-ops, right? That's for hippies. That's for somebody did it, you know, 50, 100 years ago, but we don't do that. Urban Blacks don't do it. We don't know how to cooperate. And those are very, very disturbing feedback. And so I was determined that at least I was going to stop people from saying that we don't do that, right? That we don't cooperate, that we don't know how to cooperate, that we don't know how to make it work. And so that was one of my challenges, was not just how do we get the theory right, which is what Curtis and I were dealing with early on, but I wanted to show the practice, because I had so many people telling me the practice was impossible. And I have students, because I teach this now in my classes at John Jay, part of City University of New York. And I still get students who tell me, oh, it's only theoretical and it's all idealistic. And then I'm like, but I just gave you 10 examples of how people did it. Well, that wasn't, that wasn't now, that wasn't in my neighborhood, that wasn't. So I still get a lot of people who feel like this isn't viable. But my goal was to show how viable it has been and could still be and is still. And so I think that's also something I hope we get out of this series, is to understand those lessons, right? What are the lessons learned? How and why is it viable? What do we need to do to make sure it continues to be a viable strategy, right? How do we strengthen the strategy? That kind of thing. And so hopefully that's also why I want it to be a dialogue, because I want you guys to be able to ask questions that can get us closer to how we use the knowledge of what has happened to get us to a place where we can continue to use it as a strong, viable strategy. Curtis, are you back on? Are you ready to do community economics?
Yes, I could do that.
Okay. Wait, I guess I should ask for any quick questions, except we know that Hawkins isn't allowed to ask one, but anybody else have a quick question? Okay, no. All right, go ahead, Curtis.
Okay. So with this idea of community building economics, so as I said before, the economist is treated as a priest, right? And what we say, pretty much what we say goes. And so, what we're doing right now, what you're doing, is that we're building an alternative paradigm, right? And this alternative paradigm is built off of, from my perspective, is built off of Black political economy. But Black political economy, which is pretty much is the study of the social reproduction of the African-American population or the Black population. But in terms of my own work, it's a transition from traditional economics. Like, again, this came from Lloyd Hogan, and he synthesized the works of W.E.B. Du Bois, Adam Smith, and Karl Marx. And pretty much his book was designed to explain, how the social economic condition of the African American evolved and developed to what it is today. And so what my work was is that I built off of his work, and I moved into an alternative paradigm. And the significance of the transition to the alternative paradigm is that we shift from a study and a discussion of a production function or producing goods and services or stuff, right? So generally, if you talk to an economist, they talk about production of stuff, the generation of income of stuff, goods and services, markets, or what have you, right? But in this alternative paradigm, we shift away from a discussion of production and distribution of stuff, right, to the human being. Who does the human being become in the process of producing goods and services? As a matter of fact, not even just the process of producing goods and services, but how does the human being evolve, right, in the socioeconomic system that they live in? And so the community building part of that is recognizing that we could take the concept of building community and treat it in a very similar way that the capitalists, for example, use to produce goods and services. And what I mean by that is that we could take, like the capitalists, what they've done, they've taken inputs to create an output, right? So from our perspective, right, using this kind of political economy, we shift from a discussion of goods and services to the human being. And then we look at, what we consume, right? What are the experiences we consume? Not just the food or what have you, but the experiences that we consume. And then the idea is to take control of that, right? In a production function. Inputs creating outputs. Well, what kind of output do we want to create? Well, we want to create a socioeconomic environment where we could help build the environment where human beings can reach the height of their potential, right? They reach the heights of their, pursue opportunities to develop character, okay? And so the idea of community building economics is the ground floor of using this Black political economy theory, transitioning from materialist-based economics to a more spiritual-based economics and transitioning to application. So what I do here in Buffalo, right, is that I operate, I have a workbook right now. It's called The Journey of Economic and Spiritual Man. And it's treated as, the way it's built is in this idea of Old Testament and New Testament. And that the Old Testament is this economics of scarcity and the New Testament is economics of abundance. Now, sometimes you might hear economics of abundance, you think, okay, it's this wishy-washy concept, right? But no, what is very clear when we study the African-American community, especially the young men and women in our community, is that we have, self-confidence issues, right? So what we do, like for example, the idea of we introduce this idea of personal productivity. And personal productivity is the degree and quantity of significant accomplishments attained in a particular time period that reflect dreams, values, and goals. And when I enter into the high school and when I teach in the high school, this is the language. It's a very empowering language. We shift from discussion of stuff, which is very alienating to the human being, to know, what kind of human being are you going to be, right? Do you have dreams? Right? And then we move into the direction of not only do you have dreams, but this is how we convert dreams into reality. So my work here in Buffalo has been built around the idea of transitioning from, matter of fact, I call myself a reformed economist, right? Transitioning away from economics of scarcity to using Black political economy to discuss economics of abundance, not only just for the Black community, but recognizing that we, the African community, has our trials and tribulations and how we have overcome those trials and tribulations. We become the exemplars to other oppressed people around the world on how to solve problems when you are oppressed. And we want to use that language, we want to use those practices. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm doing here. But again, I'm a philosopher, and and my goal is to develop paradigm, Black political economy, policy, cooperative economics, and then the practice is community building practice. So we have an organization here called the Leadership Academy in Community Building Economics. And we have our curriculum, which is called the Meal Ticket Curriculum, which is built around the idea of mentorship, economics, and leadership within a spiritual dimension. So clearly, what I could say about here in Buffalo is the language that is being used in this alternative paradigm is very attractive to young urban youth, particularly Black youth and Black male youth. So that's my little spiel on community building economics. That is that's the hands in the dirt of economic policy, cooperative economics, and economic theory, Black political economy. Thank you.
So can we ask
Question.
a question? Can we ask a
Yes.
question? So
Go ahead.
I'm curious because, you know, it sounds like to me, and we use the term here that we're an organization about human transformation. And so I'm curious to hear from the professor, when you're working with young people and they're thinking about starting businesses, how have you shifted from this thing about not focusing on producing things to focus on what kind of person you're going to become or how it's going to impact community? So could you kind of give an example of how you kind of, I guess, guide young people through that who want to start a business so that they're not focusing on the production of things, but on how they're helping the people who come into the company and the people who are involved become better and bring their best selves to it?
Okay, thank you. So as I just mentioned, is that what in our Leadership Academy and Community Building Economics is we have two prongs. We have a prong in personal finance and a prong in health and wellness. And so the personal finance piece, right, the economics piece is built around this meal ticket curriculum. And the meal ticket curriculum, there's seven modules. The first module is called Success Classics. So the way we respond to what your question is that our entry point, the very thing we talk about is the concept of being successful human beings. Not necessarily successful in enterprise development, but just being successful human beings, right? How do you use your 24-hour day, right? Do you have dreams, right? And what we do is we help these young men and women quantify it. Like, for example, in our workbooks, we ask can you list the top 10 things that are significant in your life? Right? Or what is important to you? What are the areas that are important to you? And what are you doing that really, like a lot of people would say family. And then our next question is, well, if family is that important to you, what are you doing that reflects that family is that important to you? So we move into the idea of, first of all, in a broad context of being a successful human being, in success meaning that you could attain what you pursue while you're alive here on the planet. But we move from there to a discussion of personal finance, right? And we talk about, like, for example, Robert Kiyosaki's work, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the financial habits of the rich, the poor, and the middle class. And then we move from the idea of success in general to what we call prosperity. And that's pretty much, success in the field of finance, economics, wealth generation, income generation, job securing, and what have you. And we move from there to we move to entrepreneurship. Then we move to what we call spiritual classics, recognizing that, okay, yeah, you could produce goods and services, but what kind of human being do you become in the process? Do the ends justify the means? And so what we do is we focus on the human being, we focus on the young men, and we give them voice, right? But in that process, by creating opportunity where they can have voice, focusing on the concepts of success, and then transitioning to entrepreneurship. That's how we do it.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, hold on. I just want to answer that also. So that moving on to entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, I just wanted to show what that could look like, right? That's what we're calling these cooperative business ownerships, right? So it's taking a human problem, a community problem. It could be the access to healthy food. It could be the affordable housing, right? It could be control over savings and investment, right? It could be needing to do community farming. It could be creating brooms or whatever, but you're looking at how do you address either your own personal family challenges, a community challenge, right? And then addressing it through this social entrepreneurship and collective ownership, collective governance, collective ownership. So that then you're showing that you don't have to, right, to be successful in life doesn't mean you have to be some sole proprietor who's exploiting their workers and making money off the backs of unfair practices, right? But that you can come together with a group of people, share resources, share risks, own things together, make decisions together, make things that are helpful and productive for the community, right? Not make things just to make profit off of them, and that therefore you can do, right, multiple things. You can grow as a human being, you can produce the kinds of things that your community, your family and community need, and you can do them in a way that's affordable as well as creating wealth for the whole group, not just for one individual to go off and become some millionaire and leave the neighborhood and that kind of thing. So combining all those things, right, and seeing that addressing the economic needs is integrally, the way that you do that is integrally connected to how you develop as a human being, and showing that we can do economics, right, and positive economics without having to destroy ourselves as human beings, without having to exploit other people and do it on the backs of other people and making inferior products and that kind of thing. So pulling all that together. Okay, I told somebody to wait, yes.
Couple of questions. Well, good stuff. Could you share a little bit about your perspective on the importance of language and language as it relates to reality creation? Could you drop some of the references in the chat, particularly your work? And then last but not least, just a little about your own personal journey to this place and time.
Sure. Curtis, do you want to start with that one, or you want me to start that one?
It's up to you. I mean, well, I could say with regards to the entrepreneurship, and I won't say much after this, right? But you know, while in Buffalo, I mean, we, like, for example, a major project that I was involved in was on the east side of the city, and we were in a food desert environment. And we were working on building a community-owned supermarket, a co-op, right? And you know, we worked on that for about 3, 4, 5 years. And in the end, we did not get the community-owned supermarket, but we did get a privately owned supermarket in that food desert. So that was a form of success. But the process, right? At first, you know, I was pointing fingers, right? That the city who had told us that they were going to give us a certain amount of money if we came up with a business plan, or if we came up with, we had like 10,000 people, 400 people who actually paid membership to be part of this co-op. And when people were taught about the difference between a private supermarket and a cooperative supermarket, they hands down wanted to go for the cooperative supermarket. But the politicians who wanted to be in power, who had visions of becoming mayor or state senators, it was too radical for them. And so they pretty much nixed it. And so, I was pretty angry about that. But then when I reflected on it, I realized that, you know, we weren't strong enough ourselves. And what I realized is that you could teach cooperative principles, but the biggest conversation, you talk about language, right? The most important conversation is the conversation that you have inside your own head, right? The conversation that okay, we could teach you tools, but do you have the confidence? And to have confidence is not a one-time event. You have to continuously tell yourself in your own mind about your own faith, about your own confidence, about your own vision. So we spent a lot of time. So that's what I came out of it, is that yes, cooperative economics, but the human being has to develop a level of faith, a level of vision, a level of confidence to see it to the end. And so that's pretty much how I got to the language that I'm using today.
Yeah, thank you for that.
But how did you get there?
I'm not sure what you mean.
I mean, did you come out of a background where the importance of connection with humanity and spirituality informed your perspective?
No doubt.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in the military. My father was in the military. I went to school at the University of Massachusetts. I was highly influenced by the professors who were professors in the African American Studies department right there. I was highly influenced by a black nationalist perspective in the college environment from people who are ex-Black Panthers, ex-BLA people, right? And they
BLA acronym for
Black Liberation Army.
All right, go ahead.
So I was influenced with that kind of language, that kind of experience, but I also was influenced by Eastern thought, Taoism, right? And because I studied Okinawan martial arts, but I was highly influenced by Taoist thought. But so it was a combination, and probably in my DNA. My parents, right? They were civil rights activists, right? So that's probably how it came about. As an economist, I didn't look for economics; it found me.
Yeah, I have a similar background to Curtis. I was raised by social activists. I was raised that we were supposed to do something with knowledge, right? Not knowledge for knowledge's sake. My parents were involved in the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the anti-nuke movement. They also believed in economic justice and transforming the economy, even though they didn't have the same language that I use. I also started out not in economics, I was in literature. I wanted to be a poet. And then I decided literature was too slow a process for change. So then I tried education, and then I realized I was a horrible elementary school teacher. So I moved into education advocacy and child advocacy. And while I was in child advocacy, I realized that if we didn't have a handle on the economics, right, that everything kind of ended up with how do we make economic change, and that the economists had a monopoly over the language, right? They had the language of scarcity. Every time we always wanted to do something that would make economic change for people, we're always told you couldn't do it, right? It was too expensive, or doesn't make economic sense, or whatever. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get a PhD in economics so I can help explain this and change the paradigm, right? Because I was so tired of the stranglehold that neoclassical and neoliberal economics had on everything. So I decided if I could study it, if I could study the alternatives, and then figure out how to translate that, and then not let us be duped, right, to stop the mythology that economics had, and that only people who knew the official terminology could think about economics. I was trying to cut into that, to stop that process. And so that's why I chose the Harvard Marxist School, University of Massachusetts, because I knew I wanted to study political economy. I didn't want to be stuck in neoclassical economics. I didn't know a lot more about the terminology aside from that, and I learned the stuff that Curtis said from the beginning. And then I took it upon myself to then teach myself cooperative economics. The new solidarity economy movement and the social forum movement started happening. I started to immerse myself in that, so I understood the new language that was coming out. I started to immerse myself in this new language about economics of abundance, which actually, it's funny that Curtis and I came to that totally different ways. We never really talked about it until we were both starting to use the language. And that's where I started also talking about that we're all economists, because I actually believe that. If you think about what we all do in our daily lives, we're always, right, trying to balance what we have with what we need and how to get it and how to do it, right? But we've allowed the neoclassical educated economists to take the expertise and the language away from us, and to say that they're the ones who know, and it's only their model that works and whatever. And so again, even just saying we're all economists is part of my way to say that we need to take this back, right? It's not something alien to us. We don't need the mythology that it has to only be this way and it's only about scarcity. And that if we could understand and see ourselves in the alternatives, that's why the book, right? Because even when I started talking about alternatives, the examples I had were not examples of Black people, people of color, low-income people doing this work. And so that was my mission, to find the examples so that when I said, this is what we can do, I could also show how we did it under which kind of conditions, and was able to find, right, horrible rural conditions, rural poverty, urban exploitation, rural exploitation, and all of those conditions, no matter what period of history we were in, you could see Black people taking charge of their own lives in ways that were economically using economic democracy, right? And sharing of resources, sharing of spirit. And as you study those things, you also see the human growth that happens at the same time when you practice that kind of economics.
Thank you, guys. That was great.
They just gave my money back.
Who did?
For that question?
I do have a question. This is Agila. My question is, are you seeing a resurgence or interest given the times, and how do you think a cooperative model or approach to economics is particularly suited to address the current moment, particularly with COVID-19 and the economic impacts from it?
Right. I can start, and then I think Curtis probably can give some insights on this one too. I definitely see an increase. Actually, since the Great Recession, when was that, 10 years ago now, 7 years ago now, I saw a resurgence in interest in collective economics, trying to solve problems in a more collective way. Because more and more people, I think, since the Great Recession are seeing that the regular models, right, just sole proprietors, small business development, capitalist development isn't helping us, right? It doesn't help our families, it doesn't help low-income people, it doesn't help people of color. And I think it's become more and more apparent that those strategies don't work for the greater good of the larger group. So I've seen lots more examples and struggles of people trying to use some kind of cooperative economics, mutual aid, and then especially since the pandemic and our economy is tanking, and at the same time, right, the resurgence of Black Lives Matter and the racial justice movement, I've been asked more and more than ever now to start talking again about mutual aid and cooperative alternatives, because people are trying to figure out, even though we can't meet, and of course in some ways cooperatives require people meeting together, right? But they're still understanding that pooling resources, mutual aid, bottom-up activities, right, matter more than ever, because especially when, you know, in some ways we have, I mean, some of our local and state governments are doing pretty well with trying to address the pandemic, but the federal government, right, is a mess right now. Our president and the leadership are mostly in denial about any of this. They don't care about public health. We don't, you know, it's obvious that we need a universal health system and a better public health system. It's obvious that we have to, since we don't have that, in the government side, we have to do for ourselves. And what's, again, the best way to do for ourselves, especially as the economy is tanking, the best way is to pool whatever we have, use it together, connect it to what we need, and then together solve our problems. And so I think it's a perfect time. One, people are sort of organically doing this stuff anyway. They're helping each other. They're starting mutual aid funds or expanding mutual aid funds. So in some ways, it's the natural human thing to do. So we're already doing it. So now it's a matter of just helping people to do it more, see if and when it needs formalizing, how to do that, how to strengthen it, how to make connections so that you get some economies of scale, meaning the more you do or the larger it is, the more efficient and cheaper it can be. So how do we connect people who are already doing it? How do we do supply chains that's where kind of trying to formalize it a little more as we see it happening, and also to give people more tools with how to make it work for the long haul. Because when you come together in a crisis, you don't always think about what's it going to look like in a year, 2 years, right? You're just trying to address something. But some of the institutionalization and the kinds of training that Curtis and I do can help people to figure out, okay, now we started doing this, how can we keep it going, right? How can we, even past the crisis, how can we keep doing things this way, not go back to the old way? How can we learn the lessons? How can we see that we can do this kind of transformation now that we've engaged in it, maybe out of necessity to start? And some of the examples in the book you'll see is the same thing. People started out doing something by necessity, but then they realized that they could keep it going because it actually was more effective and a better way to relate and to do the economics, and so kept it going. And that learning, right? The learning curve is really important. That's the other thing we keep trying to talk about is these economic alternative practices are all about collective learning and how learning develops us into better and better human beings, and learning together, and the cumulative learning that you get from these kind of practices lead you, right? So helping people to connect to that, to see that, and to keep moving forward with it, even if they just did something out of necessity to start with. Curtis, did you want to add something?
Sure. So I know Chancellor Williams in his book, Rebirth of African Civilization, he said that when Africans were faced with capitalism and socialism, he presented cooperativism, right? That is the history of the African continent. And he said it wasn't an ideological position, it just made sense. Right? So cooperation just makes sense. And so that's one part. The other part is that we're not in the industrial age anymore. So what generated the huge amount of wealth of the industrial age, that age is over. And everybody, the academics, the scholars, right, the policy people, everybody's scrambling to try to understand how to design economic in the 21st century. But the theories that were built in the 18th century do not work in the 21st century. They do not speak to what's going on right now. Whenever it was, about a month ago, when George Floyd was assassinated, right? We had here in Buffalo, right? I live downtown Buffalo. We had about 3,000 young men and women, primarily white, singing and chanting Black Lives Matter. That is a reflection of the difference of times that we're in right now. Me, right, in my influence of the late 70s or what have you, to see a bunch of young white men and women chanting Black Lives Matter, that was beyond my comprehension. So we are in very unique time periods, and we don't need to follow the models of the traditional theoreticians about economic theory. We need to leapfrog in front of them, present our theoretical models to the people of the, not only the people of America or Black people in particular, but people of the world, and say, no, economics built around human beings is what will get us through the 21st century.
Drop them references in the chat, man.
Okay.
Do we have another question? Oh, and I was just going to add also, Du Bois has some great quotes about this too, but one of my favorites is one about entering the new city as men and women, not mules, or as men, not mules, but I added the men and women, and that we should be entering the, you know, he was talking about the 20th century industrial revolution, that we needed to show, right, teach people a new way of how to do this, that we could do it with our own bodies, with our own examples. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about, right? We, Black community, right, some of the most oppressed people, right? We can show the way, the new way to do that, that leapfrogging. We can leap over the old ways and be at the forefront of these new ways of doing things and show how well they work. And we already have some examples in the co-op movement worldwide about how much more productive co-ops are. They last longer than small businesses. They survive crises better than small businesses. They're more productive than regular small businesses because of all the stuff we keep talking about. The human development that happens, the collective decision making, the creating businesses out of you know, to address need, not profit. All those kinds of reasons are why they're actually a better model if you really look objectively at what gets produced and created, you know, from that whole spiritual, human, not just the material piece of it. And so more and more, I think people are realizing and understanding that and moving toward it. Even regular capitalist companies use a lot of elements of cooperation and workplace democracy because they have to in order to compete and to stay productive. So why can't we tip it even further over that way? I think we have time for like 1 or 2 more questions. I'm not sure what to put in the chat. I know you want references.
Just whatever it is you think folks might be interested in following up on. Curtis' work in particular. You mentioned Du Bois. You know, the audience might want to do some follow-up extended readings. Because, you know, you got a lot of scholars and academics in the room. You heard them, Butler, University, So, you know, whet their appetites with some extras.
Yes, sir. I mean, a lot of the readings that I'm talking about are in the bibliography of my book. So hopefully everybody's reading the book or has read it for this book club.
That's great. That's the bibliography. Yeah. Check out the bibliography. Wonderful.
And Curtis, Curtis has some stuff in the chat. Those, the full references are in my book for both Chancellor Williams and Lloyd Hogan's work.
I think Paula's got a copy of Lloyd Hogan's on her bookshelf. So
right, Principle of the Black Political Economy. Yep.
And same with the Rebirth, Chancellor Williams. Reference materials, you can't check them out, but you're welcome to come over and read them.
Right, good. Maybe it might be easier for me to get a list of links to things together for next week or the next time we meet. Because it's hard for me to try to run the rest of this meeting and try to pull together links to things. So I can make that commitment to get some links together to recommend for next time.
Great.
And then before we end, I'm going to try to give a little bit of homework, but I do think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions before we end at 7:30.
Write one in the chat.
I definitely have one.
Go ahead.
So what would you say is well, I think you would agree that the efficacy is there, you know, it's possible to establish it, but I guess what would you say is a roadmap to that transitional state of, you know, having these cooperative models kind of take over in, I mean, a very capitalist dominated landscape? You know, what does that look like?
Yeah, I actually wrote a piece for the Next Systems project about what I see the next system as. Maybe I can quickly put that link, or I'll have it ready for next time. Curtis is doing more on the ground than I am, but I do have a theory about the more we practice, right, the more we engage in collective solidarity, economic activity at the local level, that the practice of it, the praxis, right, pulling together the theory with the doing of it will help us to do it more and more. So I definitely believe in the bottom-up approach, not the top-down. So I don't think trying to get legislation as the first thing to do, to try to legislate it. I think we need to have people doing it and then demanding the kinds of policies that would support them doing it more and better, and for more opportunities for people to do it. So I think we just have to do neighborhoods, municipalities. We need people who would get together and just start creating their own co-ops, creating their own community economic systems, and then demanding municipal support, demanding state policies, and then demanding federal policies that would support that and support other people doing similar things. I don't think we can skimp on how important the practice is, the learning by doing. But I also do argue that we need to start teaching this stuff in kindergarten, because the other problem is our education system is actually teaching us to be little capitalists, especially workers in a capitalist cog. And if not workers, then, you know, sole proprietor or whatever. And so we're not taught really about why should we cooperate, how to cooperate. In some ways, cooperation is beaten out of us. I have a couple times I've gone on a tirade against kindergarten, because I think kindergarten is the place where we're socialized away from cooperation, right? I mean, they say you're supposed to cooperate when you play, but if you think about the things that, the values that you're supposed to attain to graduate from kindergarten, it's all about individualism, right? Regurgitating what the teacher says, sitting with your hands in your lap, not collaborating or talking to anyone, at least not when it's about scholarship or academics, right? You're supposed to play nicely when you play, but you're supposed to be a fierce competitor and individualist when you're doing your schoolwork, right? So instead of helping to teach our young people how to actually work together, make decisions together, collaborate, solve problems, you know, transform conflict, we don't teach them that at all. And then, you know, it starts in kindergarten, it just gets worse every grade, right? So by the time they're in high school, they can't even imagine how to collaborate or connect with each other, right? Or even by college, if we even ask them to do a group project, everybody's in a,
Yeah, everybody's like cringing, backing away. Yeah, for sure.
because they spent all those years learning how to be an individualist and whatever, and now they don't know how to work together.
Yeah.
And so that, you know, so even that, I think we do definitely need to change our education system, or at least do enough supplemental ed about cooperation, give young people chances to cooperate. But we also just have to do it. We just have to start doing economic projects in a cooperative solidarity manner, and then demanding of our system to accommodate that and to recognize it, and try to, like, you know, sometimes I talk about a blizzard, right? Snow comes down really quietly. You don't realize it's there until you've got 6 feet of it or whatever. That's how I sort of feel about cooperative economics, solidarity practices. We just have to keep doing it, even if it's quiet, under the radar, whatever, until it builds up, that it's kind of takes over the economy.
And is there any, I guess I just want to squeeze another quick one. Is there any rhetoric in particular that you found is, you know, especially effective in communicating that to people who have never heard of things like, you know, collective action or collective business ownership?
I'm going to hand it over to Curtis in 1 second, but I do usually ask people, like, do they do anything? Do they carpool, right? Do they exchange babysitting for, I don't know, a dinner or painting or something, you know? So any of the solidarity sort of barter things. So I try to start with what people already do, and then talk about, right, how that is really a kind of collective activity, even though it's not an official business ownership or anything like that. So I do try to show people what they're already doing. You know, sometimes the language does get in the way, so I try not to say a cooperative or even a collective, but just try to describe the kinds of activities, or, as I said, ask them if they do certain things so people can connect. Sometimes I try to get them to talk about what some of their relatives have done, even if they haven't done. So anyway, any way to kind of bring it home to how they operate as a human being, and then we can talk about economics. But that's the other thing in our society. We've so separated being a human being from being an economic player that people think, right, that when we go to work or whatever, we kind of put our human beingness, we leave it outside the door, right? Like a pair of dirty shoes or something. And then we're supposed to forget about being a human being while we're at work. And then hopefully, if we're a family person, when we get back home, we're back to being a human being. And so I also try to talk about that we don't want to divide ourselves that way. Our economic being shouldn't have to be a totally separate thing than our human beingness and our familyness. Curtis, you want to help me out here with the rest of that? Oh, he may have had to leave.
Sure.
Oh, there he is.
I think that the language and the rhetoric that we're using around here is love, right? That we're saying that love is good, right? Love is good economics, right? That instead of loving your product or service, love the human being that you produce for and that you serve for. And if you love your client, you love your customers, right? You're going to give them a good product and service, and they're going to feel the love. And we're not talking about love in a static way. It's love to the best of your ability and to the best of your consciousness. But the language we're using is that, no, let's, you know, even if we have to err, let's err somewhere close to some kind of concept of love and level up. That's the language that we use over here.
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Okay, I think we're running out of time, but go ahead. I was going to say that's a great place to end, but it's okay. Go ahead, ask your quick question.
We can end there.
And then I'll give the homework. No, it's all right. Go ahead, and then I'll give the homework.
First of all, regarding your collective sort of phenomenon there, I was thinking about the NBA and how they're able to be, and how they're able to protest because of their collective vision.
Exactly.
That they are competitive and yet they work with each other after they leave the court politically and socially. But the other thing I wanted to ask you more specifically is that, do you think that the gig economy, dealing with these individual contractors, so if you drive Uber or you do Shipt or whatever that is, you deliver groceries, you're these individual contractors, but those people aren't making a lot of money. Do you think that that does more to undermine people of color, even though even though those jobs are showing that more people of color are being hired as a result of this gig economy, but are they actually benefiting from this gig economy?
Right. So I think they're not. I think that for me, the sort of good thing, if you can say there's a good thing about that kind of exploitation, the good thing is that the people who are being exploited, I think, are actually pretty aware of their exploitation, and they're waiting to find an alternative and ready for one. And I do know there is a movement called platform cooperativism, which is trying to figure out ways to change the platform so it's group owned. So like an Uber would be owned by the drivers and the customers together in a kind of cooperative. And so then you get rid of the company that's trying to make money off the backs of both the drivers and the customers. The customers and the drivers would own the physical platform that allows Uber to operate, and then would run the company together for the benefit of both parties, right? So there's lots of these new kind of, there's actually in the Bay Area, there's an existing photographers platform like that. So a bunch of who would have been freelance photographers now run a platform that allows them to do photography through that online platform in a way that's not exploitative to the photographers, but also supports the people who want the photography and makes freelance photography much better. So that, so I think those activities are kind of a natural, and at the level of capitalism that we're at now, it's kind of a natural next step for capitalism. But it does mean, I think it means there's space for us to say, wait, you feel and see your exploitation. Now we can come in and say, guess what, let's do it this way, or let's try to figure out how we could change that. So that's, so it's the good and the bad, right? It's bad because it's another level of exploitation, but I do think it's a way for people to see and feel it and realize that there's got to be a better way, and they're ripe for trying to find new ways to do it. And luckily, we're, at least in out in the world, there's lots of new ideas for how to do this better and different. So I think we were supposed to end at 7:30, so I'm going to stop the questions there, but I'm loving the conversation. I'm really excited. I'm so happy I invited Dr. Curtis Haynes. Thanks. Let's give him a hand. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Such support and wisdom. This is the first time Curtis and I have tried to do this kind of a dialogue together, so we're going to have to do it again, go on the road or something.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm really liking it. And he said he might come back to our group too. So we'll invite him back.
Please do.
Yeah, next week we're going to do chapter 1. Also, probably I'll start out just a little bit more about what makes a co-op, and then we'll get to chapter 1, which is early Black economic cooperation, intentional communities, and mutual aid. I'll give some of the highlights from that. And then I did want 1 or 2 people to commit to giving their own reflections on that chapter. Can I have like 2 hands raised or something like that? I'll put your names down and I'll know to call on you.
I'd like to give a reflection if possible.
Okay. Jeru, so it's a reflection on chapter 1. You could also reflect back on the introduction if you want, but don't go further than chapter 1.
Okay.
Hey, Dr. Gordon Nembhard, is it next week or the 14th?
No, the 14th. I'm sorry, I keep saying next week. I mean the next time we meet.
Okay, thank you.
So it's September 14th, same time, 6 to 7:30. And did I have a second person who wants to give some reflections next time? No?
Come on, y'all. Somebody step up.
I'll do it. This is Damon.
Okay, Damon. All right. I've got you both written down. Okay. And the women are going to have to step up sometime, but we'll let you get away with it for this week. And the last thing I wanted to say is anybody who has time or interest in doing a little homework, you might want to look in your own neighborhood or your own town and see what kind of history, is there any co-op history, especially among African Americans in your town's history? You can, your local library probably has some digital sources. You could do just some quick digital searches or talking to some elders, anything like that, just to see, was there a food co-op? Was there any kind of other child care co-op?
You guys might check out Ujamaa Community Food Co-op about 30 years ago.
Yeah, just to see if you've got anything in your history that's easy to find. Often it's not easy to find, but just to start out with, let's just, if you have time, just look and see. As I said, you could even just ask some elders what they know of. And it doesn't have to be an official co-op, any kind of collective activity. If there was Black Panther Party stuff happening, they had some collectives. Some of the other groups did some stuff too. So anyway, just out of curiosity, you could be doing that homework throughout the whole 11 sessions, but start to think about that for next time. Anybody else? How about anybody from Kepra have any last things?
Thank you. Great work. I knew it was going to be fantastic. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Gordon Nembhard.
Very excited.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. This has been great. I've got a whole page full of notes.
Hey, send them to me.
You wish, Em.
Have a good week, everybody.
You too.
Good
Thank
2
you.
weeks. Have a good 2 weeks. See you on the 14th.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care.